Welcome back to Coiling Dragon, Episode 2, The Carver's Secret. Linley Baruch was 15 years old when the world learned his name, not through magic, not through battle, but through a block of marble. The sculpture was called Awakening from the Dream, and it was so impossibly lifelike that director Maya of the Proulx Gallery spent 3 hours studying it in silence before he spoke. His verdict echoed through every salon in Fenley City. "This boy," he said, "is worthy of the lineage of Master Proulx." In a single night, Linley went from an unknown student at Ernst Institute to the most celebrated young sculptor on the Yulon continent. Nobles whose names he'd never heard lined up to commission him. Kings smiled at him, and the girl who had once broken his heart, a merchant's daughter named Alice, watched from the shadows of that gallery, realizing too late what she had let slip through her fingers. But Linley carried a secret that no amount of marble could carve. At the peak of his success, he returned home to Wushan Township and found his father's coffin. Hog Baruch was dead, murdered, and the man who did it was the same smiling king who had just granted Linley a title of nobility, King Clayde of Fenley City. So Linley did the hardest thing a son could do. He accepted the title. He smiled at the killer. He knelt before the throne and called himself Count Ley, the king's loyal subject, while every night, alone in his manor, Bebe curled up beside him and felt his rage burning through their soul link like a furnace. This was the mask the sculptor wore, a loyal count by day, an avenger by night. Through all of this, Linley's constant companion grew stronger. Bebe, the black Shadowmouse he had found as a baby, chewing rocks in the Baruch courtyard, was no longer a pet. By the time Linley was 15, Bebe had reached the 7th rank, a magical beast powerful enough to kill trained warriors in seconds. Their bond was deeper than words. Through their soul link, Linley could feel Bebe's hunger, Bebe's loyalty, and the ancient coiled patience sleeping somewhere in the Shadowmouse's bloodline. A hint that Bebe was more than he appeared. Wherever Linley walked, a small black shadow walked with him. And woe to anyone who threatened his master.
Linley did not stop sculpting. In fact, his grief drove him deeper into the art than ever before. He created a second masterwork, War God's Piercing Gaze, a figure so fierce that nobles who saw it stepped back in fear. The sculpture was the rage Linley could not express, the face of the man he wanted to become. It was at this time that he met Caesar, a mysterious merchant whose wealth seemed bottomless and whose knowledge stretched beyond anything the Yulon continent should hold. Caesar studied Linley's work, then studied Linley himself. "You have the soul of a warrior," he said, "trapped in the hands of a sculptor. I wonder which one will win." Linley chose warrior. He acquired a poison called blood rupture, a curse that ate a man's life force from the inside out. And in a twist of fate so cruel it seemed designed by the gods themselves, King Clayde unknowingly provided the final ingredient. Linley ground the powder, mixed the toxin, and prepared the feast. He invited the king to his manor. Clayde came, surrounded by guards, arrogance radiating from every jewel on his robes. What he did not know, the wine was poisoned, the host was in dragon form beneath his count's attire, and Bebe was circling the rooftops outside. The assassination erupted. Linley shed his human skin and emerged in dragon form, black scales gleaming, iron whip tail lashing, the legendary blood of the dragonblood warrior coursing through his veins. He drew blood violet, the sword that had been his father's treasure, and the blade sang. One stroke, and 3 guards fell. Another, and a 4th. The manor courtyard became a slaughterhouse. Clayde's elite warriors charged in waves and died in waves. Linley, for the first time, felt the full, terrifying power of the Baruch bloodline unleashed. But a king does not rule without protection. Before the night ended, a figure descended from the sky, radiating light so bright it burned. The Holy Emperor of the Radiant Church, Haydn's a saint-level expert, reached down, and with a gesture, shattered Linley's victory. Haydn's did not kill Linley. For reasons he would not explain, he chose mercy because Linley's mother, it turned out, had been a saint-level expert herself, and some debts crossed generations. But mercy came at a price. Haydn's wounded Linley grievously and imprisoned him, broken and bleeding, in the depths of the church's fortress. As Linley lay in the dark, feeling his dragon blood pulse weaken, the first rumbles of something far larger than any man or king began to stir beyond the walls of Funlai City. The world ended. A violet-eyed gold-fur ape, commander of the beasts, descended from the mountain range with a tide of magical life, thousands of creatures, from wolf packs to dragonhawks to true dragons, pouring into Funlai City like a biblical flood. The holy capital of the radiant church crumbled. Palaces fell. Streets became rivers of fire. Linley escaped during the chaos, his wounds barely healed, and found his friends Yale, George, Reynolds fleeing for their lives. They embraced once, a wordless goodbye, and scattered into the burning night. It was the last time they would all be together. Linley chased Clayde across the continent. He found the king's son, Shaq, and killed him without hesitation. In Hess City, he commissioned a massive adamantine heavy sword, a slab of metal weighing 3,600 pounds, and began training with it, developing a fighting style that used the earth's own weight as a weapon. Then, on a quiet evening, he cornered Clayde. The king tried to bargain. He offered wealth, lands, titles. Linley said only, "You killed my father. You stole my mother's ring. You destroyed my clan's ancestral hall. What could you possibly offer me?" And the Carver took his vengeance. The Coiling Dragon ring was reclaimed. The blood debt was paid. With revenge behind him, Linley stripped away everything. His noble title. His clothes. His past. He walked barefoot into the central region of the mountain range of magical beasts, the most dangerous place on the Yulan continent, a 10,000-kilometer stretch of primordial forest where 7th-rank beasts roamed in packs and saint-level monsters lurked in the shadows. He did it because he understood something that few in this world grasped, that to rise to the level of the beings who had nearly killed him, he had to leave civilization entirely. The mountain range would be his school. Pain would be his teacher. And the adamantine heavy sword on his back would carve the path forward. Deep in the forest, Linley encountered a creature even he did not recognize. A panther, pitch black, its body marked with wave-like lines that seemed to shift and flow as it moved. This was Haeru, the Blackcloud panther, a peak 9th-rank magical beast, intelligent enough to negotiate, proud enough to refuse any master. The battle lasted days. Linley earned Haeru's respect, not through domination, but through endurance. Where other fighters would have fled or died, Linley kept standing. Kept fighting. And in the end, Haeru chose to follow him, not as a pet, but as an ally. Now Linley had two companions, a Shadowmouse and a Panther. The beginning of a pack. Linley emerged from the forest to find a city in turmoil. A young noble named Keen was fighting for his life, surrounded by conspirators who wanted his governorship, his fortune, and his blood. Linley protected the boy, and in the process, hired an ally that would change the way he understood power, Zasler the Archmagus Necromancer. Necromancy is the forbidden art, the branch of magic that commands the dead, and Zasler was its master, 9th rank, cold-eyed, utterly without sentiment. He served Linley because the contract was good, and because he sensed in the young dragonblood a future that was worth attaching oneself to. And then came the breakthrough. All those years of sculpting, shaping stone, feeling its grain, understanding its nature, had not been art alone. It had been Linley's most profound training as an Earth-style magus. The moment crystallized when a saint-level assassin named Staley came to kill Keen. Linley faced him alone, a mortal against a saint. And as Staley floated above the ground, laughing, Linley pressed his hands into the earth and understood. The ground cracked. Gravity warped. Stones rose into the air as if the world had turned upside down. Staley, a being who could fly, felt himself dragged down. He could not resist. Linley had created his first technique from the profound truths of the earth, the supergravity field. He was no longer just a sculptor or a warrior. He was a mage learning to rewrite the rules of reality. Linley made a deal with the young Governor Keen, 5 years in Ser City as his protector and chief steward, in exchange for a base of operations and the space to train in peace. Jen, Keen's sister, began to look at Linley differently, with warmth, with hope, but Linley's heart was a locked door. He had buried his capacity for love somewhere in the ashes of his revenge. Still, as he stood on that castle balcony, watching the sun set over a city that was finally safe because of him, Linley allowed himself a rare moment of peace. He had avenged his father. He had grown stronger than he'd ever been. He had stared into the abyss of his own rage and walked out the other side. The mountain range still waited. The dragon blood in his veins still burned. But for now, the carver rested his hands. Next time on Coiling Dragon, the mountain range of magical beasts claims its dues, and an ancient secret awakens in the darkness between worlds. Smash like if you want the full series, and subscribe so you don't miss the next descent.